Hello, all, and good evening or good day, wherever you happen to be. I'm Dr. Bruce Koloski, and I am, I guess you could put it, your personal tour guide for today's or tonight's Spiritual Hitchhiker's Practical Guide to the Afterlife and Beyond. And in today's show, I want to take a new look at a centuries old topic and hopefully impart some information and ideas to you that you might not have known or considered, or maybe give you a different way of looking at it. The concept of reincarnation seems to offer one of the most attractive explanations of man's origin and destiny. One of the members of this group, and she also happens to have her own group, I call it a sister group to our group, Brownell Landrum. She has a group called Life is a Trip, Reincarnation, Past Life Stories, Afterlife, and more. Well, back in 2020, she issued or published a white paper called Reincarnation Around the World. And in that white paper, she estimated that approximately 2.3 billion adults worldwide believe in reincarnation, starting with a total global population of 7.9 billion back then. I know it's over 8 billion now, of which 5.3 billion are adults. That would mean that roughly 40% of adults globally currently believe in a reincarnation. Other surveys put the number as high as 51%. Once relegated to the worlds of spiritualism, mysticism, and occult phenomena, reincarnation is now a hot mainstream topic. Not only do followers of Eastern religions, New Age spirituality currently accept it, but so also do many who don't share such esoteric interests and convictions. Actually, reincarnation distinguishes itself from other spiritual, mystical, and esoteric subjects because of its rapidly expanding amount of empirical evidence. Some would argue that it's no more illogical to assume that reincarnation is a fact than it is to assume that each of us is limited to one birth and one death. Now, when you think about it, that's really not a far-fetched assumption. Natural life is cyclical. Day fades into night, turns back into day as the sun rises and sets. One season gradually gives way to the other. In nature, a caterpillar turns into a beautiful butterfly. A legless tadpole becomes a hopping frog. Over the passage of time, new generations are born. Old ones die. Now, this continuous succession of birth, death, and rebirth permeates virtually every aspect of nature, even though our own lives seem linear. So it's no surprise that some ancient observers looked at the seeming linearity of human existence and decided that life, like the natural world, might actually be more cyclical than linear. Multiple religious philosophies, movements adopted this belief in a cyclic life, or reincarnation. So in order to have a common ground on which to discuss things over the next few weeks, as we concentrate on the intricacies of this topic of reincarnation, what I'd like to do is begin with some very basic concepts and definitions. And I do mean basic. We'll expand on these later. By definition, reincarnation is a doctrine or belief which holds that our lives or our souls are reborn many times in different bodies. The word reincarnation itself comes from the Latin words re, meaning to repeat, and caro, or carnis, meaning flesh. So in other words, to enter the flesh again. While there are many various beliefs regarding the concept of reincarnation, the one fundamental principle underlying all of them is the belief that we all possess an immaterial and incorporeal something, quote unquote. We call it the soul, the spirit, essence, inner self, inner being. There's a whole host of other names. And this something survives our death and persists as a definable entity. After a period of rest, this something is reborn into a new infant body. Okay, that's easy enough. Now, regression is the experience of going back to an earlier time in this life. Past life regression involves the re-experiencing of a previous lifetime, And we'll be devoting more time to a discussion of the phenomena of past life regression in a later show. But for now, suffice it to say that past life regression is one of the most fascinating and controversial of all hypnotic phenomena. And it's just one way in which people experience past life memories. The other being what's called spontaneous recall. And we're going to devote some time to spontaneous recall. And we're going to do that next week, by the way. We'll tell you more about next week's show at the end of this show. Both past life regression and spontaneous recall are fascinating. They're fascinating because people often give vivid details, often seemingly convincing descriptions of another life they purportedly have lived. It's controversial because it involves the concept of reincarnation. Researchers have postulated a number of different theories as to the possible origin of these memories. So let's take a look at some of these. The first one is cryptoamnesia. And cryptoamnesia, and you also hear it called cryptomnesia. An individual is exposed to certain information, forgets that this was learned information, and this information reappears sometime later as a constructed memory. The individual has no idea that the memory is a fabrication of their own mind, that they never really actually experienced the content of the memory. Studies on the abilities of subjects to create fictitious lives under hypnosis, be these past, present, or future, show that some of these fantasy personalities were actually the products of bits and pieces of characters and novels, movies, remembered childhood experiences. However, it's when these recollections and descriptions become so meticulously detailed and then are subsequently verified as true that we have to question the plausibility of cryptoamnesia as a routinely credible explanation for the memories elicited in past life regression or even spontaneous recall. Now, an excellent example of this is a compelling story of the late actor and famous Hollywood leading man Glenn Ford. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of Glenn Ford. Under hypnosis, he recalled 5 previous lives, one in particular as a French cavalryman under Louis XIV. The astonishing part was that although Ford said he knew only a few basic phrases in French, under hypnosis, he spoke French with ease while describing that life. And when recordings of his regression were sent to the UCLA language labs, they discovered that not only was Ford speaking fluent French, he was in fact speaking the Parisian dialect from the 17th century. Number 2, possible explanation, is psychodrama. Psychodrama, we can define psychodrama as a psychotherapeutic technique in which a patient is given an opportunity to enact the conflicts that are causing or exacerbating the problem through role-playing in either a group or a one-on-one situation. In other words, they take on the role of a fictitious personality and they act out their conflicts or problems as someone else. Now, some have argued that cases suggestive of reincarnation might be a kind of psychic psychodrama in which a segment of the subconscious mind takes control of the subject during the regression and impersonates a fictitious personality for the purpose of providing insight into the subject's hidden conflicts or their wishes or their desires. Now, this argument becomes, at least to me, becomes untenable when you consider that genuine psychodrama exists as the result of a projection, be it conscious or unconscious, of a person's inner conflicts. However, past life recall can contain such a plethora of historical, personal, extremely specific observations, data, often seemingly mundane details, as to rule out, for me, the explanation of psychodrama. I find it really difficult to understand how a highly publicized case of a 5-year-old's detailed recollections of life and death as a naval fighter pilot during the Second World War, or as was the case of one of my recent female clients who gave detailed and verified accounts of her life as a Jewish male living in England during the 1930s, who on a business trip to Hamburg, Germany, in November of 1938, found herself caught in the middle of the infamous Kristallnacht. She was beaten, or it was a he, was beaten and subsequently incarcerated in a German concentration camp where where he died. And it's difficult for me to understand how cases like this can be projections of anybody's inner conflicts. The third possible explanation is racial memory. Now, this hypothesis holds that somehow, our DNA molecules, the carriers of our heredity, can contain the past memories of our genetic strain. Now, this hypothesis might be tenable if you show that this person belongs to a line descending from the person they claim to be. But in most of the catalog cases of reincarnation, the separation of time and place makes this an implausible concept. Number 4 is soul memory. This is the idea that people can access the memory of their soul, as well as another soul, through the Akashic records, which is the spiritual record of everything that has ever happened. In esoteric and spiritual belief systems, the Akashic records are hypothesized to be a cosmic or a universal database, a clearinghouse, a library that contains the collective information and experiences of every soul or being throughout time. It's said to exist on a non-physical, energetic level, known variously as the astral plane. He'll also call the zero-point field or the Akashic field. According to those who subscribe to this belief, these records can be accessed through various means like hypnosis, meditation, channeling, intuitive abilities. The records are believed to contain all knowledge and wisdom, including past, present, and potential future lives or potential future events, as well as information about individual soul journeys, past lives, karmic patterns. But this theory doesn't account for the continuity of character traits which seem to pass from one life to another. So it's important to note that the concept of the Akashic records is a metaphysical construct, not empirically proven. And while it's fascinating, it does remain within the realm of conjecture and personal belief. Fifth possible explanation, collective unconscious. Those who subscribe to this theory hold that the collective unconsciousness is a pool of memory which contains all that has gone before, not only for our individual families or tribes, but for the whole of the human race. It's an imprint of everything that is or was. Someone once called it an incredible psychic computer. According to this theory, given the correct access code, we can call up anything or anyone. If we tune into this source, we can remember or relive any life that has previously been. Now, similar to the concept of the Akashic records, however, the collective unconscious is usually regarded as a part of our consciousness, whereas the Akashic records are seen as something apart, a kind of universal consciousness, a vast psychic library to which we happen to have access. I guess you could call it the ultimate internet, UWW, Universal Wide Web, in case that went over anybody's head, with Wi-Fi nonetheless. The collective unconscious is the stories of all of the human race, all the archetypes, all the plays that are enacted over and over and over again with a cast of thousands, or of one, the two people. The actors may be different, historical setting may change, but the essential stories remain the same. Each person plays their allotted part. Now, this may go a long way to explaining why so many people regress to a particular figure or a group experience. It may not be that they have actually been that person or part of that group, but they may have played that part in the play somewhere along the line. And therefore, it resonates with them. You know, in the words of the immortal bard, all the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players. Each has their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts. That's from As You Like It, Act 2, Scene 7. Number 6 is retrocognition. There is a theory that everything that has ever happened is out there somewhere. Or at least the impressions or the energy of it, kind of like radio waves. Retrocognition, or the psi experience, as PSI, as it's often called, is when an individual telepathically perceives a scene from the past and thereby derives information about a past event which he or she could not have acquired through normal means. As an example of this, when a person visits a physical location and is aware of details pertaining to that location, streets, rooms in a house, so on and so forth, without having previously visited that location or having read about it or seen pictures or videos of it. And then number 7 is the classic concept. And we all know what that is. That concept holds that reincarnation is an evolving process of physical exploration for the perfection of the soul, a system of justice and balance. In this system, we learn needed lessons through karma, cause and effect, and we carry this intuitive knowledge with us through successive incarnations. This theory states that each entity is born into each earth life with a level of awareness, be it conscious or subconscious, that's been established in their past lives. Now, how the lifetime is lived will dictate whether the rate is raised or lowered. In the view of the classic concept, each human lifetime is an opportunity to learn specific lessons. One lifetime, for example, might focus on learning greater responsibility, while the next might focus on being more empathetic to others. If in one lifetime the soul experiences being a wealthy individual who wields power over others, for example, it would then be of value to contrast this with an experience of living in poverty and powerlessness in another lifetime. You see, the soul really has no preference for one side of the equation or the other. The body may, the brain does, but the soul doesn't, because both sides help draw out different aspects of the soul. Give me an example. This classic concept, I think, is best explained in a very short piece by an author by the name of Barry Benson. And he used the following analogy in an attempt to explain the concept of karma as it relates to reincarnation. A small boy enters school and is placed by his teacher in the lower class and charged with learning these lessons. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt do no hurt to any living thing. Thou shalt not steal. So the little boy grew into a man. He did not kill, but he became cruel, and he stole. At the end of the day, when his beard was gray, when the night had come, the teacher noted that, although the student hadn't killed, he had failed to learn his other lessons. Go back again tomorrow, the teacher told him. When the new day dawned, the pupil returned to school and was placed in a higher class because he had accomplished one lesson. Then his teacher gave him these lessons to learn. Thou shalt do no harm to any living creature. Thou shalt not cheat. Thou shalt not steal. Again, the boy grew into a man. He was careful to do no hurt to any living thing. He tried not to be cruel, but he stole from his neighbors, and he cheated to accomplish his own ends. At the end of the day, when his beard was gray, when the night had come, the teacher recognized the fact that the student had learned to be merciful, but had failed to accomplish other lessons. Once again, the student was told to return on the morrow. So it may be with man. The Bible admonishes man to be perfect, even as God is perfect. But maybe, just maybe, such perfection can't be achieved in a single lifetime. According to this philosophy, it might seem more just to allow a person to return again and again and climb the ladder of soul evolution, so to speak, until all the lessons have been learned. There's no longer a need to reincarnate, and the soul is ready, finally, to join an eternal union, to become one with the Creator or source or whatever you want to call it. As some argue as this being the ultimate culmination of the cycle of reincarnation. History credits amateur hypnotist Maury Bernstein with the first documented instance of past life regression via hypnotic or past life exploration via hypnotic regression. In 1952, Bernstein hypnotized Virginia Teague, a Pueblo, Colorado homemaker. She suddenly began speaking with an Irish accent, and she claimed her name was Bridie Murphy. In 6 sessions, she described a life lived in County Cork, Ireland, in the 1800s. Bernstein related the details of his regression sessions in a book called The Search for Bridie Murphy, which became a bestseller almost upon publication. It spent 26 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list, sold 200,000 copies in the first 2 months. In 1956, Paramount Studios translated Bernstein's book into a motion picture of the same title. Bridie Murphy became a 1950s phenomenon. It rivaled a hula hoop in popularity. There were Bridie Murphy parties. They were called Come As You Were parties. There were Bridie Murphy jokes, parents greeting newborns with, "Welcome back." The case triggered strong interest in reincarnation and hypnotic regression. The sudden emergence of the reincarnation hypothesis into public attention triggered attacks, as you can well imagine, from science and religious skeptics. Life magazine took a totally adversarial position with a 2-part article published in March of 1956. The first part addressed the details Teague had given. The second presented the view of 2 psychiatrists. On June 25th, Life magazine pronounced the case debunked and closed. But several years later, the debunking was debunked. Now, in the years since the story of Bridie Murphy burst on the scene, there have been thousands of documented and well-researched cases worldwide that have been collected by researchers. The first one I personally encountered was back in 1978 when I was finishing my first doctorate degree, and I was establishing myself in the field of clinical hypnotherapy. And this is kind of what spurred me on to enter the study and practice of reincarnation and past lives. And that was the work of the late psychologist Dr. Helen Wambach. Her work focused on the statistical analysis of past life recollections of regressed subjects. She remains one of the most credible and noteworthy of all past life researchers. In the 1960s, she set about to disprove reincarnation by conducting a scientific investigation of her own. She was a total skeptic. She questioned over 1,500 middle-class subjects while they were in hypnosis. The subjects were asked to regress to a former life. Now, not satisfied to just ask who they were, when they were, and where they had lived, Dr. Wambach also made them describe their status, gender, race, clothing, footwear, eating utensils, tools that they used, their money, the look and the feel of their money, the housing, even the food they ate. Wambach's questions to her regressed subjects were detailed and meticulous, and in all but 11 cases, now that's less than 1%, the descriptions were totally accurate. Matter of fact, the recall by subjects of clothing, footwear, type of food, and eating utensils that they used was better, more accurate than in popular history books. Now keep in mind, this was back in the 60s and 70s, well before web access or the rise of archaeology and antique shows on TV. She found over and over again that her subjects knew better than most historians when she went to experts to have these her findings verified. Her subjects were invariably correct. Now, Dr. Wambach went on to publish her findings in 2 books: Reliving Past Lives, The Evidence Under Hypnosis, and Life Before Life. I highly recommend those books if you ever have a chance to pick them up. I believe they're available on Amazon. Although she began her work as a skeptic, Dr. Wambach would later write, I don't believe in reincarnation. I know it. One of the best-known collections of scientific data that appears to provide apparent proof that reincarnation is real is a life's work of Dr. Ian Stevenson, who headed the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Virginia. Instead of relying on hypnosis to verify that an individual had a previous life, instead he chose to collect over 2,500 cases of children who spontaneously, or without hypnosis, remembered a past life and reported very specific details of an apparent past life. The details were investigated under strict scientific protocols, which were later verified by investigators. In order to collect his data, Stevenson methodically documented the child's statements of a previous life. Then he identified the deceased person the child remembered being, and he verified the facts of the deceased person's life that matched the child's memory. He even matched birthmarks and birth defects to wounds and scars on the deceased. And these were verified, by the way, by medical records. His strict methods systematically ruled out all possible normal explanations for the child's memories. Now, when Stevenson retired in 2002, his work was taken over by Dr. Jim Tucker, who is a board-certified child psychiatrist who serves as medical director of the Child and Family Psychiatry Clinic, and he is associate professor of psychiatry and neurobehavior services at the University of Virginia. Well, besides investigating a number of specific reincarnation cases, he came across some rather interesting information of a statistical nature. I want you to be aware that what I'm about to relate to you represent cases in which the past life memories were recalled independently and spontaneously by the subject, and not through information obtained by regression, which in some cases that can yield significantly different results. Well, Tucker found, first of all, in 70% of the people who remember a past life, remember dying a violent or an unnatural death. Tucker discovered that the vast majority of cases he investigated involved people who remembered past lives as men, not women. Tucker wondered, why should this be so, since it seems a bit odd, and when you consider the fact that proportionally there are roughly the same amount of men and women on the planet. He also wondered if gender had anything to do with it, with why some people remember their past lives. So with further analysis of over 2,000 cases, he determined the cause was likely due to another factor. Of the cases he studied, 30% involved a past life of someone who had died a natural death. These cases, the natural death cases, were evenly split between males and females, and that reflected the general population. However, of the remaining 70% of cases where the past life ended in an accidental or a natural death, an astounding 73% of them involved males. Now, those percentages accurately mirror death statistics, since far more men than women die unnaturally. Men tend to have more dangerous jobs. They fight in wars, more so than do women, and they take more dangerous risks. Therefore, Dr. Tucker realized that someone might be more likely to recall a past life if that life ended prematurely in a violent or in a natural death. Second thing he found out was that 9% of people who remember a past life exhibit an unusual skill related to that former life. I know you've heard the expression, he or she is a natural. Remember, they made a movie out of that, Robert Redford, The Natural, a baseball movie. This is where someone effortlessly picks up something new, like a sport, a language, playing an instrument, a musical instrument, excelling at a subject in school, so on and so forth, and doing it much quicker and without any of the effort that the average person does. Many times environmental factors, one's culture or genetics can explain it. Yet in many instances, scientists are at a loss to explain the apparent ease that some people seem to have in learning and exhibiting often extraordinary talents and abilities. Now, I've wondered that myself. I mean, I've watched people play the marvelous piano, sit down and play a concert piano, and I have trouble with chopsticks. Researchers found that nearly 1 in 10 people who remember a past life exhibit a skill related to that former life, leading them to posit that it might be possible that these people retain some knowledge and experience from former lives. Third thing Tucker found out, 35% of people who remember dying accidentally in a past life have an extreme fear of dying the same way again. You know, many of the cases Tucker and his crew investigated included people who believed they were murdered or accidentally killed in a past life. The subjects in over 1/3 of these cases exhibited an intense, often morbid fear of that particular cause of death. And for some people, their elevated level of anxiety resembled that of a patient suffering from PTSD after a traumatizing event. They exhibited avoidant behavior like refusing to fly in airplanes, intense dislike of wearing ties, scarves, or anything around their neck. They may have a debilitating fear of height, so on and so forth. Personally, as a past life therapist, I come across this time and time again in my work. Recently, I worked with a lady who had a fear of gas explosions, dying in a gas explosion. And turned out she, in a past life, in the 1880s, she and her whole family died in a gas explosion. This happened in England. So I found it so fascinating that I think I told you last week that I was in the process of creating a training program, board certification training program for people who want to do past life regression and therapy. And I'm using this as an example. I'm putting in the recording that we did of this lady's session because it was so fascinating. Fourth thing that Tucker found out was 58% of people who remember drowning in a past life have an extreme fear of water, like we saw in the one we discussed above. Researchers have documented many cases of people with phobias that appear to stem from remembered past lives. And chief among those is aquaphobia, or fear of the water. And that's a phobia I come across time and time again as a past life therapist. Tucker speculates this may be because drowning victims spend more time in the process of dying than individuals who were killed in an automobile accident or shot to death or having a head lopped off by a guillotine, which makes sense. Okay, so Tucker surmises that the past life trauma from drowning is more likely to travel with them into the next incarnation. Fifth thing he found out was 26% of people, this is interesting, 26% of people who remember a past life demonstrate some other form of ESP. Tucker has written about the unexplained psychic abilities of people he's investigated who recall living before. And he theorizes that further research might reveal a link between past life memory and ESP. Matter of fact, a lot of times, we're going to talk about this in a future episode, NDEs, near-death experiences. Many people experience a near-death experience find that they come back from that near-death experience with psychic abilities that they didn't have prior to that. The sixth thing he found was 20% of people who remember a past life believe they lived before as a deceased family member. See, one theory is that we all are part of a particular soul group. We also call it a soul tribe, with whom we regularly incarnate. Seventh thing he found, 20% of people who remember a past life also remember something from the time between death and rebirth. Now, these people describe an often surreal experience in the spirit realm in between lifetimes. That's also a very popular form of past life regression, known as between lives or life between lives, which we'll be taking a closer look at in a later show. So all this leads, I think, at least it leads me, to certain questions, such as, what is the significance of reincarnation? What's the purpose of our multiple lives? What can we learn from them? These are some of the questions that many people have about the meaning of reincarnation. Well, reincarnation can be seen as a way of understanding our our true nature and identity as spiritual beings who are temporarily inhabiting physical bodies. It can help us realize that we're not limited by our physical appearance, our gender, our race, our nationality, our religion, or any of the other labels that we may use to define ourselves. Reincarnation can show us that we are much more than what we see in the mirror or what others see in us. Reincarnation can also be seen as a way of exploring our potential and our creativity as spiritual beings who have infinite possibilities, infinite choices. Helps us to appreciate the diversity and richness of life on Earth. Gives us countless opportunities as we go through our successive lifetimes to experience different cultures, languages, arts, sciences, philosophies, religions, lifestyles. It can also be seen as a way of evolving our consciousness and compassion as spiritual beings who are connected to other beings. Help us understand the consequences of our actions, thoughts, our intentions on ourselves and others, both in this life and in future lives. And it can show us that we are ultimately responsible for our own happiness or unhappiness. Now, next week, I'm going to do the first of 2 shows devoted to showing you how you can explore your own past lives. As I said earlier, there are 2 ways in which we can recall past life experiences: through spontaneous memories and past life regression. So some of you out there might be saying to yourselves that you don't think you've ever had a past life because you have no memories of it. But I'm going to show you next week that you do have memories of it. You just don't recognize it as such. So next week we're going to examine 21 different signs that you've had a past life. And one of them, I promise, one of them is absolutely going to blow your mind, because it's going to introduce a little discussed concept to you that will take reincarnation to a whole other level. So you definitely won't want to miss next week's show. Tell your friends to join us. Remember, this show is done within the Facebook group Reincarnation, Past Lives, and the Afterlife, and they'll have to be a member to tune into that. So that's next Wednesday at 6 p.m. Pacific time, Pacific Daylight Time. So before I close, I want to leave you with a thought. If it should seem strange to you that you've lived before and that you will live again, is it any less strange that you should have lived at all? Your very existence is a miracle. Each day is a gift. As some unknown scribe once wrote, yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery, but today is a gift. That's why it's called the present. So until next week, thanks for tuning in and happy trails. See you next week.